So this is an interesting one. The meta-analysis of this will be that morality cannot be attributed to a single group identity label, be it ethnic, religious, etc. So hang on real quick. Sorry about that. So I think, and I could be wrong. This is the worst thing about Jews is, I ask these questions. I ask the rabbis, I ask the people who work at Citizen Cafe, etc. Just direct, honest questions. But I don't always get direct and honest responses. I suspect, and I could be wrong, but they haven't told me if I'm wrong or not, and they won't, that one of the reasons I was kicked out is because they were being subversive, and I caught them doing it with my psychology. This is what I love about learning in self-applying psychology is it makes the invisible visible, as in manipulation and deception techniques employed by corporations, companies, etc., governments, politicians, social engineers, global, whatever you want to call them. So with Citizen Cafe, they kept saying things like Beyonce, or which is better, blues or jazz, right? Black culture. No, I don't like black culture. I consider it to be not so sophisticated and refined as elegant as the music and culture I prefer, which would be like Vivaldi, Pablo de Sarasate, etc. And so when they had us not giving us a choice, right? Oh, you have to pick one or the other, and I would say, lo, neither. um, Vivaldi or Beyonce, I would say lo ohevet Beyonce, ani ohevet Vivaldi. I think they were actually using the Hebrew course to psychologically manipulate the students in teaching them a second language to, deconstruct the racism and a psychological desegregation, which you see reflected in Hollywood and, mainstream media, social engineering through advertising alone, right? Count the number of race mixed couples you see in ads on YouTube, etc. Every social media outlet. Nobody's free of it. Every conservative outlet, liberal outlet, etc. So now, for those anti-Semites who will leap onto this and say, "Oh, see, the Jews are subversive," no, whites and Christians and white Christians are also hyper subversive while accusing the Jews of that which they are guilty of and blaming the Jews for their own choices. For example, Andrew Torba owns Gab. And despite claiming to be this resistance against the liberalism and the globalism, it's a grift. He's using Christianity as a scam, right? A Christian grifter, griftianity. And thus he pushes the. He allows drug deals on his website. There's advertisements for CBD, things like that, 40% off in the name of Jesus somehow. And that's really funny because I had I opposed, I was the opposition against this. Like, if you're a Christian, why are you allowing drug deals on your Christian website? Oh, because you're a prostitute. You worship the money, the dollar. Gotcha. But in that interaction, the guy said, "Bro, there's this like painting from 1200 Common Era of Jesus holding a giant marijuana leaf, man. So that's literally proof that you should buy my drugs in the name of Jesus." There's an artist depiction of Jesus as a spirit sticking his arm into this dude's arm that's shooting heroin. And the caption says, "Fuck off, Jesus, get your own heroin." So, like, is that proof that Jesus wants me to do heroin? Like, no critical thinking, right? Um, but yeah, same thing with the school and everything else. It's, anti-racism, anti-sexism, anti-homophobia, which is, they're lying about the true motives for these things. It appears altruistic on the surface, but below the surface, there's a hidden agenda going on that really has more to do with wealth and power and control. So it's interesting because a lot of the Orthodox Jews talk about tikkun olam, which is transforming the world. But the Jews who, I'm under the impression, I could be wrong, but the Jews who run Citizen Cafe are secularists. They're Tel Avivists, and Tel Aviv is notorious for not exactly being religious. Yet they're doing the same thing. They're using their company and their Hebrew lessons to transform the world by transforming the minds of their students. So I do suspect that. But this is where I can't fall into a single identity label, right? So let's say the opposition is anti-Semitism to the corrupt things that Semites are doing. And this is where we get into the tale of two roommates. I have two white roommates. One's a conservative and one's a liberal. The conservative, not the smartest guy, but very moral, very good guy. He insists on having sex outside of marriage despite being a Christian. His justification is God wouldn't want me to buy a car without test driving it first. And I keep explaining to him from a secular position as well as a religious position that, this explains why you're single at 50 odd years old, because all you do is date whores when stealing from you, which is his pattern over and over again. And they always, steal from him and bad things happen, but he insists on it. He can't help it. It's not his fault. He has a, mental illness condition. The other roommate, the liberal, is an aggressive liar to the point that even this morning, right, this is the kind of guy who will lie to your face right through his teeth, knowing that he's lying. This morning, I was walking the dog back home, and it's raining outside, and he's a smoker, so he was smoking in his room with the window open, and the smell hit me. Now, he's not supposed to smoke inside the house. So I said, "Oh man, you're smoking in your room, are you?" And he literally, with the lit cigarette, said, "No, I'm not. I'm not smoking." So the left is more aggressive at dishonesty, which seems essential. But either way, so it's not like, oh, okay, so because the Jews are lying, therefore the whites must be telling the truth, right? This is a false opposition. Because CNN is lying, therefore Fox is telling the truth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, all are full of shit. But there was a point where I did believe in, ethnocentrism and what the Germans of the Third Reich called blood and soil. And this is what I want to get into in my timeline analysis, because there is genetic factors and culturally transmitted traits, such as language, etc. And a lot of behaviors are culturally transmitted, not genetic. Or epigenetics, a combination of genetics and environment. So I moved back to New Mexico after so many years. More than once, but I think the first time I did was like 2015. And I moved in with my mom. So the theory on that was to falsify my own statement, sort of third party objectivity. If I was just being a petulant child and blaming my parents for the choices of my actions, I had to know. Because at that point, I had identified my own family, my mother, my brother, and my father, as environmental stimulus that acts as contributing factors to maladaptive thoughts and behavior. They are destructive, not uplifting. I thought, well, what if I'm wrong? Let's find out. Let's retest this now that I've quit drugs, quit drinking. No, they pushed me away from success and towards homelessness and drugs, etc. And along with being abusive, at least my mom was. So, so much for the brown pride, La Raza, right? For example, when I had gotten back, I think that was from Seattle. We actually did a Craigslist ride share from Seattle to Albuquerque. I had my art with me, and I was selling my art at that point. I was actually selling prints and galleries and stuff. And my most successful selling piece, for some reason, I got back and there was an art festival in Albuquerque, like the biggest one in the state. And my mom said, "Yeah, go to it. Take your art and sell it," which was really stupid of her. I should have maintained my guard to protect myself from my family's destructive influence like this. But I think one factor in that is that I was tired from driving across the country without very much sleep. So I obeyed. I went. And I told my brother Larry very specifically, I have a brain injury. Please watch me to make sure nothing happens. I'm not lying about that. I'm dead serious. Between us as brothers. Because a lot of people could think that I'm faking it to get away with stuff, right? Well, he's lying about it. Yeah, he's totally making that up. 70,000 volts going through his body totally wouldn't affect his brain. Such aggressive liars. My brother, of course, didn't watch me. Instead, he bought beer, even though I was sober. Or trying to be sober. No, that's right. At that point, I was struggling with the alcoholism a bit. One of the major reasons I left Seattle was I couldn't find environmental reinforcement for sobriety, let alone intervention. Um, because people are heartless and backstabbing in that secularist, white, capitalist society. Anyway, my brother bought us beer, and I lost my most valuable piece. Now, instead of taking it seriously, even though this piece had made me quite a bit of money, they didn't. They were just like, it's just a stupid drawing. No, this is actually cash. They costed me cash. So they verified my, you know, analysis is accurate. And even again, later on, I ended up moving to Socorro. This guy named Thomas Apodaca. And I was giving this old friend of mine who I don't communicate with anymore because he's a marijuana user. um, he's a white liberal from Los Angeles. And I was saying, it's the white liberals who destroyed New Mexico with their drug culture and porn culture and, free love, sort of polyamorous, anti-monogamous culture, etc. Right? Porn, drugs, rap. Uh, well, I was giving him all that crap. He PayPal'd me $100 to send him a print of the art piece I was working on, which is an amazing piece. I took it to the Walmart to get a copy. My fellow Hispanics stole the art. And with my brain injury, I couldn't figure out that it was actually the girl working behind the counter who had stolen the art as my back was turned. And so I called the cops. The cops talked to the manager. They said, you're not allowed to see the security footage. Only we are. In retrospect, I realized that was a ploy, a deception from them, a manipulation. So you probably heard me like a brain injured fool talking about how a buddy had sent me $100. It's a very poor Hispanic town. And so they targeted me and stole the art to make money. Um, so if you remove whitey from the situation, you remove Jews from the situation, etc., right? Because a lot of politicians say, Mexican problems are the cause of white people, or, etc. And Nazis will say, it's all the Jews' fault. If you remove those people from the situation, you're still going to have a culture of drugs, poverty, and crime. This was initially a hypothesis, but it's been validated as a theory repeatedly through these experiences that Mexican genetics cause Mexican culture and Mexican problems. Mexico is so rich in resources. Why didn't it become a world superpower instead of the United States? The Mexicans. It's not the land, it's the people. Simple as that. Which I ended up having another Mexican landlord who had lied to me that nobody smoked marijuana at his rental, and then I moved in there, and sure enough, there was a guy smoking marijuana, and he knew it before I moved in. When I confronted him on all these things the Mexicans in Las Cruces were doing that were really backstabby and shitty and all that, his response was, those are just Mexican things. Like, you're right, it is the genetics. Hence, my mom having my brother out of wedlock, and my dad selling my inheritance, etc. They were more Mexican than Catholic. The genetic influence was a stronger determinant factor in behavior than culture and the culturally transmitted trait of Spanish Catholicism. This is how corporations are controlling the evolution of human genetics through epigenetics, through simple products and services. Whew. Excuse me, I have a delivery arriving. that. Got interrupted. So corporations control genetic evolution through cultural evolution. Genetic evolution and cultural evolution are integrated. These are not parallel processes. These are the same process. And so one affects the other, and it's kind of a reverse or a mix between what is cause and what is the effect. Is genetic evolution causing cultural evolution, or is cultural alteration causing genetic alteration? I think it's both. I think it's a feedback loop. Um, and so where that, where the rubber meets the road, where science applies to real life for me was just this pursuit of the truth, this quest for truth, right? And I used to think, okay, so what would form a state within a state? What group is the strongest group that opposes the legalization of marijuana, that opposes pornography, that opposes the trans agenda, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Initially, because I was in Seattle, very secularist society was not positively reinforcing of sobriety, monogamy, just abstinence from drugs, etc. If anything, it was aggressively pushing those things. I thought, okay, so this is the white liberal secularism. Therefore, if I go to the church after 20 years as an atheist, I will find a drug-free environment that positively, cultivates and reinforces traits like monogamy, etc. Yet I was wrong. The church completely failed to resist or oppose any of these things. So the church is controlled by the same globalists that control secularists through politics, right? When you get into secularism, you replace the church with the state, messiahs with politicians as your new saviors to worship, and political parties and are your church denominations, and so forth and so on. Academia is infiltrated. It's all controlled opposition. So the Christian church failed. I thought, well, perhaps, my race will resist. No, they did not. My race is not exactly low rates of STDs, crime, drugs, drug overdose deaths, etc. So then I thought, well, what about Judaism? If it's really the Jews behind all this makes them superior, so surely I can adopt their traits. And that's my latest analysis, is that I can use Judaism to not simply passively endure this horrific, nightmarish age of corruption, which isn't that bad until it gets bad. And when it's bad, it's really bad. Like when the marijuana hits me, and all of a sudden I'm in a 3 day schizophrenic episode fighting the urges and the voices. And yet they're still pushing legalization anyway. They do not give a shit. Anyway, but with Judaism, the rabbis seem to be so disagreeing with each other and things like that. Right. So I also had joined a convert Judaism course, and I simply asked questions that were honest and expected a direct, honest response. I brought up Walter Berkmeyer. I said he was a Jewish Nazi, which is true. You can Google Walter Berkmeyer. He was in the SS. Unlike Emil Maurice, he was kicked out. He was not protected by Hitler. Once they found out his Jewishness, right, a German Jew, and he later on co-pioneered, to this date, the only most effective treatment for Parkinson's, like L-Dopa or something. I can't remember. And the rabbi responded, "Oh, he wasn't Jewish." And I said, "Okay, so how do you know that? What's the source of this statement? Because the Nazis went by birth certificates and possibly blood tests as well. So what are you basing this on? That he wasn't really Jewish?" And they said, "Oh, he'll get back to you." The rabbi never got back to me for months. Still hasn't, because he was Jewish. And I don't get why applying critical thinking would be bad. And then there's another thing, like the another rabbi they had, a substitute rabbi, because of course the war in Israel started, and that guy A woman asked about what Christianity was, and I informed her that it was in our online shiur. I informed her that it was Roman state propaganda that Josephus helped the Flavians like Titus create Christianity to subvert Jews to Roman rule with the illusion they could keep their religion. The original Mashiach was aggressive and violent. Jesus is like this milquetoast, namby-pamby pacifist, right? All limp-wristed. No, don't be mean to the people murdering you. Love them. You're supposed to love the Romans as they have the knee on your neck. Okay. Jesus says so. It's so stupid. But the rabbi said, I'm going to cut you off right there. Josephus was not Jewish. There's no source that says that he was. And I held my tongue. I exercised self restraint. I simply muted and waited till the shiur was finished. Waited till the next day. Waited a full 8 to 12 hours. And then cited Dr. Henry Abramson's videos showing the sources that Josephus was Jewish. He was a Roman Jew, a turncoat Jew. But you see in the Old Testament, the Tanakh, a lot. There's Jews who side with the enemies of Judea against Judea and assist them because they have, insight into the language and the culture, etc. So instead of admitting that I was right, they kicked me out for creating conflict. But it wasn't my intention to create conflict. I didn't get an apology. I didn't get an okay, I was wrong, you were right, which really doesn't make sense because Judaism has prohibitions against gullibility, which I was applying. I was applying halacha and got kicked out for it. Like the whole world's gone mental. But so I switched my, I've adjusted my time priority hierarchy to where I'm going to focus on violin, but I can't seem to just forget about Hebrew and Judaism. But that's like a thing. I only have so much thought space, and I'm dedicating most of it to reading the required course material for my university, etc. So the violin will replace learning Hebrew and Judaism, specifically because of these events with the rabbis and then the secularist, Hebrew Instruction Company, Citizen Cafe, etc., etc., etc. And it was the same thing because it's a business model. Converting to Judaism.net or studyjudaism.net, I think. No, it's converting. They charge $250 to $500 per student, and they have 150 students plus. It is a lot of money every month. So they're Judaism salespeople. And I think the reason they kicked me out was I caused 3 students to drop. And conversion typically takes 3 years. So that is like $36,000 or something that I costed them. That wasn't my intention. I was just genuinely seeking the truth. And I think halakha applied means that whew, you should be wary of rabbis who use the Torah to make profit. I could be wrong in all this, but they told me to stop asking questions. The same thing with Citizen Cafe, right? They stopped responding. And I think the reason they are no longer, replying to renew my contract or whatever for the next quarter is because my, noticing all this stuff they're doing or just making other students uncomfortable by not accepting Beyonce and blues and jazz is costing them money. So it's almost like the secular Jew and the religious Jew are mirror images of each other in many ways, just like the Jew and the Nazi, the Mexican, the white, the black, the Christian and the atheist, etc. There's a lot of differences, of course. So, like I said, I'm going to continue with the prayers and reading Parashah, but once again, find myself. I hope that it works, there was a point where it felt like Judaism was giving me this, psychic shield against the harmful effects of marijuana. From a secularist perspective, that is a delusion, but it still felt very real. So I'm hoping, but at the same time, violin. I mean, that's really good for neuroscience, neurorehabilitative exercise. Anyway, I should get back to studying.